Welcome. I'm John Whatley with Stein Whatley Astorino, Louisville's personal injury law firm. I've got my partner, Rob Astorino, with me. Today we are going to discuss winter accidents and common myths that surround winter accidents. Rob, lead us off here.
Yeah, that's right. You know, a lot of people, there's myths, there's old wives' tales going around about, you know, how snow and ice may change liability out on the road. And, you know, the only reality is that it doesn't change it very much at all. It only changes what you're required to do to be safe. So we're going to talk about some of those.
Yeah, we're going to talk about, as a general overview, speed limits, weather excuses, and insurance coverage. First myth, Rob, that I'd like you to maybe talk about is, if I'm driving a speed limit, it's not my fault.
So that is false. You can absolutely be at fault for a car wreck, whether or not it is snowing, raining, dry, any weather condition, if you're going at or below the speed limit. Speed above a speed limit can be one factor in determining whose fault a wreck is. But regardless of the weather conditions, you know, in both states that we cover, you are required to drive your car in a controlled manner that's reasonable for the road conditions, whether those be weather, you know, emergency responders or otherwise.
Right.
It requires you to keep a proper lookout, which essentially means watch where you're going. And it requires you to be able to have enough reaction time based on that lookout and your control of the vehicle to be able to avoid collisions with other vehicles.
Right.
And in certain, you know, extreme weather conditions or extreme traffic conditions, combinations of those, other situations, driving the speed limit could actually be unsafe behavior.
Correct.
And, you know, like anything, at some point, you know, you just got to use your common sense. If it's a totally icy road, it's the middle of rush hour and everything's packed, people are having trouble slowing down, you're driving 55 miles an hour and you rear end somebody, you can't just say, hey, I was driving the speed limit, everything's okay, because obviously it's not.
Right. Myth number 2, snow and ice mean accidents are no one's fault.
So that is false. Snow and ice can cause situations where a wreck that would have been someone's fault may not be someone's fault. There's also something called the emergency doctrine, which is something where if you lose control of your vehicle and you take evasive action to avoid harm and you end up hitting someone causing a lesser harm, you may be able to be absolved if you were reasonably controlling your vehicle before that happened. However, snow and ice being involved in a wreck in and of itself does not mean it's no one's fault. Again, as we just discussed, you know, ever since you learned how to drive a car, you know, as a teenager, you were always told if the weather conditions get worse, you know, you have to drive differently. You have to take increased precautions to keep yourself and others on the road safe. That's something that everyone knows, everyone can relate to. And so again, driving behavior that may be safe on a dry road with lots of visibility and low traffic can become unsafe and irresponsible on an icy road and high traffic situations with low visibility. And so if you take risky behavior or you drive recklessly, even if under other conditions that behavior would be okay, you can still be at fault if you cause an injury accident. And so don't think just because someone hits you on an icy road that, oh, it wasn't their fault, it was the ice's fault. Well, you know, it may be a little bit of both, but ultimately, you know, we as drivers have the responsibility to take weather into consideration.
Yeah. All right. Well, myth number 3, if roads are bad, insurance won't pay.
So this may be one of the most true myths that we've discussed so far, but it's more just because insurance doesn't want to pay you for anything. Not just when
they would love that if that were the case.
Right. But yeah, insurance companies, it's commonly known in the insurance world that because people don't heed the advice that we gave on the first two myths, they continue to drive the same way they would. They don't take into account the weather. They increase their risk. Insurance companies know that at-fault accidents are going to go up on snowy and icy days, and they've already baked that in. Now they will try to argue things like the sudden emergency doctrine that we talked about earlier. They'll argue things like comparative fault, which may, reduce what they'd ultimately have to pay.
We have that going on in a case right now that Eric is handling.
Yeah, and
it's very silly. We're going to defeat it, but
it's genuinely
still making the argument.
Right, it's a very tenuous argument, but that's why even in these snowy and icy wrecks where it seems like it's an obvious case, you do need an experienced attorney who goes to trial and who knows how to handle these personal injury and car wreck cases to help you out. Not directly related to a car wreck situation, but my now wife actually used to live in an apartment complex where they had a sign going out to the parking lot that was like, "We will not remove snow and ice, and we are not responsible if anything bad happens to you." You can't just do that. You can't just tell people, "Hey, we're not going to follow the law, and if you get hurt, we're not going to pay for it."
Right.
A lot of people
wish strategy, Cotton.
Right, and it would not have worked out for them if something happened. We were both attorneys even back then. We always got a good laugh walking out of her apartment, just being like, "Get a load of these guys." But having said that, if it even discourages one person,
which I'm sure it has,
from filing a claim that they otherwise would have been because they saw a sign, they're like, "Oh, now I'm out of luck. I can't make a claim that I normally." That sign paid for itself. It was probably $1.
Oh yeah.
So that's John and I always advise people to, if you have a question about a case, if you've been hurt and you think it's somebody else's fault, call us. We'll shoot with you straight. It may not be somebody else's fault, but if it is, we definitely know how to help you and get you the compensation you deserve. So just because there's a change in weather, change in conditions, it doesn't mean that people can all of a sudden become irresponsible. They still responsible for their actions. Insurance is responsible if they're at fault to back them up.
Yeah, certainly. Move on to myth number 4. If I'm driving in bad winter weather and I get no traffic ticket, then there's no case. So I guess what I'm saying here is if the defendant doesn't get cited at the scene after a winter-related car wreck, then there's no car accident case or no injury case.
So that is certainly false, at least in the states that we do work in. I know that there are some states out there, I believe Virginia is one of them, where if you cause an injury, they will cite you for something. Kentucky and Indiana are not those cases. Just because you hit someone and cause an injury, it may not rise to the level of a traffic violation, even if you break the civil law of responsibility. There are different things that officers are looking for, like we talked about earlier in this video, especially on snowy, icy days. You can cause a wreck and it can be your fault for driving irresponsibly, even if you don't get a speeding ticket, even if you don't get a reckless driving ticket, even if you don't, get cited for any other type of violation.
Right.
And, sometimes that's because proving a traffic violation is a different standard of proof than we have. There's all kinds of reasons for that. But don't assume in winter weather or really any weather, just because a police officer did not issue a ticket, that's not the end of your case. We still have to determine if the other person's at fault. And in fact, I would say that the vast majority of our successful injury cases, people are not ticketed.
Yeah, I would agree.
90%.
Just to clarify that a little bit, I mean, Rob was talking about essentially, even though there was a civil violation, there may not be a criminal violation, and you don't have to have the criminal violation to prevail on the civil violation. Moreover, and I'd like to maybe clarify just for the viewers' benefit on the standard burden of proof, what he's referring to. Many of you guys know that in criminal actions, the burden of proof is beyond a reasonable doubt. What most people don't realize, because they don't see this in TV as much, is what the burden of proof in civil cases is. And that is just a preponderance of the evidence, okay? It just means that it's more likely than not, or 51% likely, which is a lower standard than the criminal burden of proof. That can also have, even if there were a violation of the civil violation and a violation of a criminal action, sometimes it can be hard to charge that because oftentimes the officer did not witness it. And so it's like, who's going to testify? I mean, it just makes it a lot more difficult to pursue those types of criminal violations.
Yeah, all valid points, all considerations as to why, you can still have a civil recovery even if there's no traffic ticket. Right. And so, kind of putting this all together for the viewer is if you're involved in a wreck during the wintertime, our advice to you is basically the same as if you're involved in any wreck, with the additional step of, make sure that you're in a safe, warm place. Make sure you're not compounding the issue by being a road hazard yourself. I'm sure everybody out there has seen, these very tragic videos of highway crashes just piling up in ice conditions. You want to remove yourself from anything like that. But once you've done that and you've gone to your safe space, assuming that you're able to, gather the information, get the insurance information from the other driver, take a police report if you can, get the pictures of the scene. We have a much more thorough video about all the things you should do after a wreck to preserve your case. But the advice absent,
And by the way, if you'd like to see that video, go check it out up in the left-hand corner.
Right. And so, with the added thing of, being additionally safe while you're doing all those steps, our advice largely remains the same. We've also talked about what kind of attorney you need to seek to help you with these. We have another video on that as well. And
check it out.
That's right. And that advice still rings true. The attorneys that are good at taking cases to trial, the attorneys that know how to work these cases, they can work these snow and ice cases too.
I think it's important. I know we've talked about it in multiple videos, and is to contact an experienced attorney early in the process. With these winter wrecks, oftentimes there's multiple cars involved. You kind of alluded to it earlier, which can make finding out or determining liability a little more complicated. There can also be coverage issues because if you've got 5 different cars involved and you got multiple parties injured, you got multiple property damage issues, it could be problematic that there's not enough insurance to cover all of the different injuries that are out there. And then it comes down to figuring out, well, what other insurance policies or coverages are available to help me recover my losses.
Right. An experienced attorney can definitely help you, explore all of those avenues, make sure you're not leaving anything on the table, make sure you're fully compensated, get you back on your feet.
Right. You only have one opportunity to do it. You can't come back and come back to the well. So don't miss that opportunity. Make sure you have good legal representation.
That's right.
Stay safe out there during winter months. Stein Whatley Attorneys, serious results.